And thanks for joining us today for a coffee talk. I'm delighted to be with our CEO and CPO, Saknik Bhattacharya, and Jitin Nathani, who will introduce themselves in just a minute here. But I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping first. We are recording and we'll share a recording after the presentation, and we will field Q&A throughout because this is intended to be a very interactive conversation. I can really respond to questions and bring them into the dialogue as we go, so there's no need to wait. If you have a question, use the Q&A panel in the chat and we will incorporate it in. We're looking forward to talking about interoperability, TEFCA, covering a lot of ground. We may even have a couple of dad jokes for you today. Jitin and Sagnik, can I ask you to introduce yourselves? Maybe Sagnik first.
Sure. Thanks, Michelle, and good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, depending on which part of the world you're dialing in from. So I'm Sagnik. I have been the CEO for Rhapsody for almost a year now, and my background's in computer science, and I spent about 2 decades working in different parts of the healthcare technology industry on the EHR side, on the payer technology side, as well as working on several of the national interoperability initiatives in volunteer capacities. So really excited to be here today, and I've come prepared. This is supposed to be a coffee chat, so I've got my coffee prepared and looking forward to the dialogue.
And good day to everybody. My name is Jitin. As Michelle mentioned, I am the Chief Product Officer here at Rhapsody, and I spent about a decade outside of healthcare in fintech and e-commerce, and then came to healthcare about 15 years ago and have been deeply immersed in interoperability since then, driving a number of the national collaborative initiatives and working with a handful of innovative interoperability companies along the way, and really excited to be here. Thank you all for attending and joining.
Well, let's get started then. Sagnik, in this conversation, we're going to talk a little bit about observations with HIMSS not too far behind us, and you out and about talking to customers. Curious to kind of have you set the stage for us. What are some of the pressures and pain points that you're hearing in the market?
Yeah, so one of the really fortunate things that we've got going on for us at Rhapsody, and for me in my role, is we get to talk to a lot of our customers in different parts of the healthcare economy. We talk to providers and health systems, we talk to public health groups, we talk to healthcare technology companies, many of whom are part of this webinar. At a macro level, there's a couple of things that are happening. Today, unlike a decade back, it's not about digitizing the patient record. Most providers have EHRs today, and there is some amount of point of care interoperability that is already happening. And this story is playing out not just in the US, but in other markets around the world, in Europe, Middle East, Asia Pacific, and so on. So now the conversation has really shifted towards how do you take this digital infrastructure that has been put in place, which is primarily the EHRs, the revenue cycle systems, and so on, and enable digital transformation with it. So that's the macro conversation. Now, there's a couple of challenges that that conversation faces. First is on the provider side, they're budget constrained, and there's always downward pressure on technology investments. And within the last 3 years, it's really hard to get the investment dollars for these initiatives unless you're talking about AI. So I know I've talked to so many CIOs, and the conversation is, well, we have to reduce our budget by 5%, except that we have to spend more on AI. So that's one dynamic that's playing out. On the other side, we see a lot of technology innovations happening across the industry, with various technology companies bringing really cool, innovative things to market. AI, digital front doors, digital therapeutics, and so on and so forth. And their challenge is, how do you increase your speed to market? How do you enable the providers who are ultimately going to use your solution, or the patients, to do it in a seamless way that fits into their workflow? So in that conversation, there is a little bit of a tension there between IT departments at providers that are trying to do more with less, and the technology innovators who are trying to work with those IT departments to get them to do that integration work that they need to do. So I think we see that dynamic playing out over and over again over the past few years, and I think that's going to continue to be the case in the near future.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I see that as well. And interoperability has continued to grow, yet also remains a problem for folks. Can you expand a little bit more on how you think? I know you have an interesting take on interoperability, both operationally and analytically, and was curious if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. So one of the things that we see, and I've been on the healthcare technology side of things for a long time. When you have something that is really innovative and disruptive, you get it to a pilot phase, you have your proof of concept, and you get your first customers live on your system. And it's it really, in order to go from that initial proof to scale, one of the biggest barriers you have to solve is how do you interoperate with whatever the core systems of record are that your users, which could be the providers, could be the patients or the revenue cycle people, the systems that they're using, and how does your data flow seamlessly between all these systems and do so in a very scalable way. So if we are not able to solve that problem in a scalable, low cost kind of a motion, a lot of these innovations just will die on the vine and fail to thrive. And so the definition of interoperability, in my mind, has expanded from like how we used to talk about it 7-8 years ago, which was really around, can the provider access the chart at the point of care, to how do different software systems that could be within a healthcare business, could be out across healthcare businesses, how do they all talk to each other and seamlessly fit into the right workflow?
Really reduce the burden on everyone, right? On clinicians and technologists.
Can I jump in on this?
Oh yeah, Jen, please, absolutely.
It has occurred to me over the course of the last 15 years in interoperability that two things happen. First of all, everybody defines for interoperability themselves around the problem they're trying to solve at that moment. And it's like when you say, hey, I work in IT and ergo I support you when you like make a phone call and like your phone is not working. It's such a broad realm of things you do in interoperability. And what's happened over the last 15 years, particularly because regulatory forces have had to have a play in here as we moved from paper records to interoperability in a relatively short time, right? In 20 years, which sounds like a long time, but it's a relatively short time to move such a gigantic industry in this direction. And regulation comes out and initiatives come out, even cross community, like national initiatives come out, focused on just one sliver, because just moving one sliver is really hard. And Michelle mentioned TEFCA like in the introduction. One of the things we will talk about along the way here, it's again focused on just a sliver of all the things you might need to do for interoperability. But at least for that moment, while that sliver has the limelight, it seems to be the definition of interoperability, and kind of takes away from the fact that there are actually multiple pieces to this puzzle. And depending on the business outcome you're trying to achieve, that sliver might not be the only thing you need in order to be successful, or if it's the right thing at all.
Now you've raised TEFCA, and I know in the audience we have both folks who are creating solutions, healthcare technology solutions, and health systems, healthcare providers. And I interact with these folks. Not everyone has as clear of an understanding, I don't think, of what TEFCA means or what it really is facilitating. Can you say more when you're talking about that sliver of data? What does that really mean for the folks on the phone?
Sure. Okay. So just to level set, so TEFCA stands for Trusted Exchange Framework and Common Agreement, which is a mouthful of buzzwords, which you put them together don't necessarily make sense unless you understand the history. So what I will do is I'll ignore the buzzwords and I'll go into the history and give you the Cliff Notes version of the history. And then we can get into the sliver, which I think is a critical part. Over the course of the 2010s, we saw 3 national networks involved in a particular type of data exchange, which I'll get into, really evolve and take shape and actually grow to scale. We saw eHealth Exchange, Commonwealth Health Alliance, and Care Equality. 3 different organizations who approach this particular issues in interoperability, particular slivers, and really demonstrated scale in various subsegments of the larger health IT community. And at some point in time in the late 2010s, actually came together, figure out a way how to connect to each other, starting off almost as competitors, semi-competitors, to the extent nonprofits compete, which they do, sometimes more than people realize on the outside, but then came together and created this moment where across these 3 segments, as patients moved around for care, you could do one particular thing at very efficiently, and that is ask for that patient's standardized clinical chart data. So if I'm a patient, or rather I'm a treating provider, I'm taking care of a patient, I could ask for a patient with whom I have a treating relationship, who I'm going to see or I'm currently seeing, and I can ask for that data, and these networks would federate amongst each other and bring you back data that's whatever is enabled in the CCDA, which is a very specific format with specific data for that patient that you're going to take care of. So for that sliver, these 3 organizations came together and enabled it. They each differentiate from each other with various bells and whistles and other slivers they try to tackle. I won't go into all of that. You can spend a day on each of these things, literally. But for this sliver, they came together, and what the federal authorities realized was this is something we should be doing nationally. They had designs of it actually many years behind. Went back, I spent a little bit of time in the Obama administration and saw the sort of seeds of this starting to get planted. But the industry took the lead, and then sort of government caught up and said, okay, it looks like industry has a lead here, but they're plateauing. They're not really catching everybody. They have some limitations on how they're working. And it's what we should do is create a mechanism for this to become ubiquitous. And so TEFCA came about, and the notion was we're going to anoint through the process of through the free market and a process of certification. We're going to anoint these networks who can come together and provide that sliver of data and commit to sharing that data with each other and through their participants. These networks were called QHINs, Qualified Health Information Networks, of which a couple of those national organizations are QHINs, and a number of private sector participants have jumped into the fray and become QHINs, and they've all committed to connect to each other. So the long and short of it, and that was a Cliff Notes version, believe it or not, but the long and short of it is that you have this tapestry of organizations who are working together, and as end user organizations, as health IT organizations, as technology innovators, as healthcare innovators, you have the opportunity to connect to any one of those networks and know that when you ask for the patient that you're taking care of and you're treating or imminently going to treat, you can ask for the data, and whatever is available in those networks will come back, right? Incredibly valuable if you think about the efficiency of being able to send a single query and be able to get this data from these connected networks. It's just, you can imagine, it doesn't take much imagination to realize how big this could be. That's the positive side. There's a practical side as well. TEFCA is fairly nascent. It just went live in December. Good reason to believe it'll scale relatively quickly over the next 2 to 3 years. But there's also aspects, we talked about, and Sagnik brought this up, that when we talk about interoperability, you have to think about what is your definition, what's the definition, how much does it encompass, and ultimately, what is the business goal you're trying to achieve? And a TEFCA is a very specific type of thing you can get done, which is I'm taking care of a patient, I have a treating relationship, I'm asking for the data, and I want to give the clinical chart data. Over time, they may encompass other purpose of use, not just treatment. But there are a couple of aspects of interoperability that you do have to think of holistically if you're an innovator or even a clinician in this space. Namely, what else do I really need this data for? What's a business or clinical or technology outcome I'm looking for? Am I looking for it, for example, to train AI models? That's very different. Or to do population health, or to manage a panel of patients, or to improve my operational efficiency around patient engagement. All of these are not treatment activities as defined here, but these are all aspects that you need to figure out solutions for. Querying for a patient is very different from, let's say, pushing data from one provider to a health IT company or to another provider or to a clinical researcher or a device. All of these are very different types of use cases where you're either pushing or you want to subscribe to events. I want to understand what's going on with my patient. Please let me know. All incredibly valuable different modes of interoperability and very different use cases and purposes of use. And again, filling out this whole box is going to be, it's going to be a lifelong task for a lot of us. At the end of the day, as a player in the space, you have to ask yourselves, what are you trying to accomplish? And what are the pieces that are available out there and the platform out there that kind of brings us together in a way that helps you make cogent sense of the data you're getting for the patient and turns all of that almost gobbledygook of data, hopefully good data, but a lot of it's gobbledygook, bring it together and give you a real view of the patient that's actually actionable. And so understanding the platform and the pieces that connect to that platform is incredibly important in order to actually tackle your interoperability goals. All right, that was a whole mouthful. Sagnik, Michelle, what would you add to or emphasize there?
That was great. I learned a couple of things as well. And I think I know a lot of folks on the webinar are healthcare technology companies who are building, for the most part, software product, could be AI products. So maybe just to elaborate a little bit on that, like what is, like, let's take a specific example. A lot of companies are building AI solutions. I think what might Tefka mean for them, or how should they think about it?
If you're building an AI solution today, Tefka today, like I said, only focuses on treatment. So you cannot really leverage Tefka per se in order to, for example, build your models. To the extent that your AI models are being used at the point of care and the clinician utilizes your product or service or offering at that point of care, or approaching that point of care. Typically, the notion on these networks is 24 to 48 hours. I don't know where the latest and greatest they've landed on, but it's typically, hey, I'm going to see this patient tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon. I want to prefetch their data so I can take care of them. That's kosher within the bounds of what's called treatment. At that point of time, pulling from Tefka can make a lot of sense if it's in that scenario. If you're training models up front, it doesn't really work. If you're trying to enable other types of actions to happen in terms of operational efficiencies or optimizing for payments and the like, it certainly doesn't work in those scenarios because it's not applicable in those scenarios. But there is a wide variety of clinical scenarios where like the Tefka data certainly makes sense. One thing I'll point out is that when I mentioned way at the beginning of my spiel. Incidentally, quick digression. I have a coffee cup. Actually, it's a teacup as well. I don't actually have any coffee and tea in it because I'm a New Englander and I speak so fast. If you caffeinate me, you really won't understand anything I'm saying. So I'm trying to actually. This is me.
Just an empty cup?
No, it has water. It does have water.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So what I was saying was that one thing to realize is that I mentioned earlier that you get standardized data. For those of you who have been around the block in healthcare, those standardized come with air quotes, which I will not put out here because I think they look ridiculous. But that it comes with air quotes because the reality is even standardized data from one institution looks different from supposedly standardized data from another institution. So what you have is demographic data that comes in that doesn't really match for good or bad reasons, badly captured or just not correctly entered or not correctly shared or whatever the case may be, or the systems are different, et cetera, et cetera. You have clinical data that may be coded differently from one organization to the next. A lot of organizations don't even utilize necessarily the standardized set of codes that are in the latest and greatest versions of government guidance. And so you get all this data and you still actually have to make use of it and turn it into value. If you are in a desperate situation, like I noticed when I was leading one of those organizations that our number one use case, by multiples of any other use case, was a clinician who wants to meet who is about to meet a patient they have never seen before. In that situation, any data, even gobbledygook data, is actually really helpful because at least you know something about the patient. But if you actually want to perform clinical care on the patient in any effective way, you have to go well beyond that. You have to know what their codes, you have to understand what actually happened to them. What were the procedures? What are the diagnoses? And so on in a way. And if you have, let's say, AI tools, decision tools, analysis tools, whatever the case may be, your EHR, your population health platform, whatever it is, whatever system it is you use, actually being able to semantically enable those different sets of data to interoperate, so you understand what happened and that you have the right patients, you actually confirm their identities together. Those are still hard problems, and TEFCA doesn't address them. TEFCA opens the spigots for that clinical care and treatment use case. There's still a lot that happens that needs to happen upstream before that actually turns into value. And that's, again, ignoring the fact that there are other types of use cases that at least TEFCA today is not serving and likely won't. Everything measured in government regulation, by the way, is measured in years, not like weeks, right? So you have to keep in mind that even if these things get there and there's a grand vision for getting there, we're talking about years before you can get there. And for most of us, that's too far a timeline to be planning for. We have to kind of get work done now.
It's important work, but it underserves all of the broader interoperability use case or the broader need of the people delivering care.
Exactly. It's really important to know what business outcome you're going for. And in some cases, this could be the silver bullet you're looking for. More often than not, that's a mirage. You have to understand how it fits into a greater puzzle of things you need to put together to be successful.
Yeah, the one thing that you mentioned that really resonated, and it lines up with many of the conversations that I've been having, is what is the business case and what is the problem that you're trying to solve? TEFCA is not a problem unto itself. Quite frankly, interoperability is not a problem unto itself. There's some legit things like patient care, like I want to take better care of the patient in front of me, or I want to build a co-pilot of some sort to assist patients, to assist physicians, and then you kind of work backwards from there. And part of that is I need the data that I need in order to either present it to my user or train my models on or set the insights back into the right workflow. How do you accomplish that? For some things, you need interoperability and integration. Some things you do not. And then as you peel back that onion, it might be that the solution that you're looking for can be accomplished through one of different methods, one of which could be TEFCA. The other thing that I will also mention as we talk about this is that some of the problems of interoperability are global. It's not just the US, right? So TEFCA is a very US specific initiative. If you look at how healthcare operates on a global scale, we have several customers who are for example, in the Middle East. They've set up HIEs over there, which are fairly successful, and I think it accomplishes some of those same types of use cases. But if you start with the use case, which is that I need to provide better patient care, I need to get the context of the patient who just showed up for me out of the blue and I have no history about, then the method on covering that use case will reveal itself. And depending on the geography, the country you're operating in, depending on the type of data you need, depending on your workflow, the answer might be different.
And other regulations, more broad regulations may also come into play. Like we've only touched on TEFCA today, but one of the points that came up when we were talking earlier is around how last year there were 5 regulations. There's going to be, it's very certain there will be more regulations. And so helping be prepared for those or bringing those other regulations into the conversation as well. I think Match IT is one that's been mentioned. How do you all think about that?
I want to actually take the quick step back, and then I can jump to Match IT specifically. But I'm going to take the quick step back. So just bringing those last 2 points together. So globally, there's a set of actually, honestly, fairly common use cases that happen from one place to the other, but you don't have the same set of regulations available. Globally, there's increasing regulation, and right now in the U.S. healthcare, there's certainly a wave of regulation. So the step back I wanted to take is if you think about the fact that today's regulation, next year there'll be another 3 or 4 or 5, and the year after another 3 or 4 or 5. What you don't want to do is kind of be building, just be building these pieces on top of each other without any thought to where they might go and what you're going to end up with. People end up, when you're building a health IT system, a technology system to power your enterprise, oftentimes you'll end up in this sort of Frankensteinian place where you suddenly realize I'm getting lots of data, I've connected to all these things, and now I don't know what to do with them. So thinking about that beforehand, especially if you have a play in this industry and you're really pushing forward, you're realizing that there are going to be steps ahead. There's going to be new regulations and so on, and being able to have the flexibility and the foresight to actually utilize that data. It's not easy. It's not easy because you do have to actually read the tea leaves a little bit, but also design with flexibility and situational awareness in mind. And again, globally, that's true. GDPR in Europe changed a lot, and our customers were ready because of at least on the part for what they were depending on us. Because we're constantly thinking and enabling a platform that really works across boundaries. Match IT, particularly here in the US, is helping to solve the issue of the fact that demographics data is captured and captured very inconsistently and is matched very inconsistently with little transparency into how well those things work. And it's the old Peter Drucker quote, right? You can't manage what you can't measure. So there's an aspect of this. If we can bring transparency and rigor to the industry, then we have an opportunity to enable everybody to, for example, match patient IDs more effectively, and that's incredibly important. The reality, as with all regulations, is they can't aim for the top. They can't aim for the ceiling. If you aim for the ceiling, you leave far too many players behind, right? We have a large, fragmented, and in many places underfunded healthcare industry, and those places are incredibly important for serving our entire population. And oddly enough, particularly the most indigent are in those locations or working with those enterprises who have the least funding because they're there to help and they're part of the safety net. So what these regs end up doing is that they try to raise the floor as high as they can, with that continuous balance of how many people do we leave behind and how much work does industry have to do net to try to get to this floor. It's for those who are on the leading edge of innovation or broader scale, etc. You're in this place where this floor is still not good enough. You need to still do additional work on top of it. So we're very excited about all these regs, by the way. TEFCA, Match IT, there are, like you mentioned, there were 3 others that came out last year around decision support.
Yeah.
And so there are more that are in the hopper. We're excited and we're actually supportive generally of a lot of them, if not most of them, maybe even all of them. I've not done the reg count. But you have to realize that these are just they are limited to what regulations can effectively do and how they have to be designed. So as a technology company, you certainly have to be thinking you can't depend on them to solve the business problem for you. You're really missing the mark if you think that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question for you. If I am if I'm early stage healthcare technology company, this is a great education around TEFCA. Sounds like it might solve some part of the data that I need, but it doesn't sound like it addresses all of those issues, obviously. And so what options as health tech company, what options do I have for getting the data that really will be necessary to power my application? How do you think about that?
So if I'm a health tech company today, I think there's probably 2 things that are kind of very common patterns that I need to solve for. First is, how do I get data from whatever the right source is? And the right source could be from the provider EHR. It could be through a multitude of sources because you're building some AI models or what have you. And so that's really one part. And how do I make sense of the data so that I can drive whatever intelligence or workflow or the software innovation, the technology innovation that I'm doing. That's first part. And the second part is, when I have created those innovations, how do I deploy that innovation into the right place for the right person in the right workflow? And that innovation could be an insight about the patient that is being seen. It could be a clever way to do something that has never been done before. It might be like, you're doing some referral guidance for the provider who's placing the order. It could be a patient care gap, next best action, or something to that effect. So you have to solve for those two parts. How do I get the data? And then how do I get my insights out to the person who's going to act on it? So on the first part, there's a couple of things to think about. One is, what's truly your core differentiator? What is it that what's the value that you're going to add versus what is a previously solved problem, to put it more very bluntly. And you might, from your perspective, you might think of that as a commoditized service. Like, for example, if you're setting up a company today, you're not going to build a brand new HR system, right? You're just going to go out there, pick the best HR system. So I think from a data integration, data gathering, and then second part of that is really getting the data up to the level of quality so that you can do something with it. Those are all problems that there are vendors in the industry who can solve and have, do that for a living and do that really well. So that it may not be the best idea to put your really scarce resources to solve that problem. So you have a build versus buy decision that you have to make. Most of the time, it's when you're starting out, you could try to build something, but pretty soon you're going to find yourself at a spot that buying is going to be economically better. So that's the first part. Then the second part, which is, how do I now get my innovation to the point of care? And I think that again, similar thing where there is, especially if you're working in the provider ecosystem, there is no easy way around the fact that you need to work with the provider IT teams. You need to work with the EHRs that the providers use very likely, or the RCM system. And you need to talk that language, both technologically, what APIs you use, what standards you use, as well as talk the language of the IT teams, the integration teams. So when they use terminology like, which version of CCDA you're using, are you using HL7 this or API that? And oftentimes it's, if you're a health tech company starting out, you don't have that expertise in-house. You don't have the translators, if you will, who's talked that language, who have done this a few times before. And so that's where you could, you should think about, like, who can I lean on to potentially do that work for me? Because again, my differentiation is in the innovation that I'm creating. It is not necessarily in the data gathering, in the data cleansing, in the workflow integration, and the skill set of talking to provider IT teams and so on. So I'd highly recommend that, thinking about it that way. Focus on your differentiators. Let some of these standard capabilities, leave that to someone else.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You need the data to be of high quality and be there, so it doesn't become a blocker to your core competency, but then really invest in your core competency. Makes good sense. I know we're going to talk about AI because we have to, but before we get there, I did bait the audience, Sagnik. I did tell them that you're going to have dad jokes, so I think you should give one right now before we move on.
Well, yeah, since we're on the topic of regulation, okay. So here's one I like. All right, knock knock.
Who's there?
HIPAA.
HIPAA who?
Sorry, I can't disclose that information.
Great.
I think that'll be very popular with the audience. Everyone's got something to talk about with their kids when they pick them up today.
I have full plethora of dad jokes at the ready. Healthcare dad jokes are typically more related to like healthcare delivery. I have my stock of those. We'll see if I might roll one or two out over the next 30.
Nice.
Yeah, it turns out drones of support is really a thing around here.
Do you have any dad jokes to add, Jitin?
No, I do not.
No. No. All right. Okay. Well, I love dad jokes. It could go on for a while. The audience is hanging in, and they were demanding the dad jokes. So thank you, Sagnik, for fulfilling that. We did want to talk about AI and specifically a little bit around how we're tackling AI. It's really exploded in the last year. I don't think I have a conversation internally or externally in the last month where someone doesn't ask something about generative AI. What are you doing with it? How are you using it? How's it helping you build even marketing content? And so what's your take, Jen, on artificial intelligence?
So AI, we kind of look at AI from it. AI is really two very different buckets of work for us, right? There's sort of a product work and there's like market work, right? From a product perspective, it's how do we bring in all the potential of AI into our products to enable us to do what we have done better, faster, more intelligently, more efficiently, and the like. If you just take a step back and look at Rhapsody is what, a 34-year-old company, and we've reinvented ourselves again and again to continue being a mainstay, a rock, a bedrock for a lot of our customers as they've gone through all the evolutions we've gone through, regulatory and otherwise, over the last 34 years and globally, right? And so incorporating AI, which I don't think is going to be a fad. I think it's an important aspect of technology and how it's going to be delivered, and beyond technology and offerings that are going to be delivered. And so we've been inspecting how to bring that into our products and make them, all of those things, both from a perspective of innovative in terms of the offering itself, as well as just more efficient in terms of how that offering operates, how our customers are able to utilize it, and the like. And there's a lot of examples. I'll give you the one example, especially since it's so imminent, right? Our identity product is an EMPI, and enables patient matching to occur as bring in different data sets, to my problem that I've stated earlier. So it helps solve part of that problem, which is let's help me connect up all the data sets for this patient and ensure that I have the right patient there. And historically, there are a number of heuristics and algorithms and so on you can use. But it turns out if you apply the way we have neural net machine learning algorithm, and you can create this opportunity where the decisions that would have been made by a very knowledgeable data steward can be replicated and automated, and put the data steward in a position of really not repeatedly attacking the same tasks, but like attacking the real edge cases. And so you have like this pilot who sits on next to you. We call it autopilot because it takes care of so many of these these matches which did not happen, and allows you to like really manage those queues of work down. We've found that it can, you can reduce like the number of items in your queue by 50,000 hours of data steward time over like 2 million records that you're evaluating, and you can do that in less than an hour and a half, and actually get that kind of throughput where you have these identity things connected. So again, for those of you who don't understand identity space, sorry if some of that sounded like Greek, but the long and short of it is you have this opportunity to utilize the facets under AI. AI has so many things itself, right? Facets under AI to enable a product that's much more efficient, to enable automation and enable workflow productivity, to Sagnik's point, eventually that business outcome that you're trying to accomplish. So that's sort of the product perspective. I'll touch on the market perspective and ask Michelle, you and Sagnik to weigh in here. But on the market perspective, we support a number of AI customers, and they are out there bringing artificial intelligence into the healthcare domain to enable better healthcare outcomes of all sorts, right? Clinical, business, et cetera, et cetera. And in that respect, what we try to do over here is help them. Your AI is only as good as you can get your data to be in seeding it, so that you can actually do the right work and have algorithms that actually function appropriately, since it does depend on learning. And we take seriously this opportunity to turn the data that comes in through all of those internal and external connections that we've referred to over here so far, and actually make them useful, so that the secret sauce that these companies bring to the table can actually be realized as they go out and reach out to their customers. Michelle, Sagnik, what would you add to that? That's been my thinking on it from a product officer's perspective.
We're in a pretty interesting time in our lives when it comes to technology evolution. There is a bit of paradigm shift happening, and probably the last biggest shift was when smartphones got and multi-touch interfaces got introduced. So I don't know where the world's going to end up in like 4 or 5 years when it comes to AI. I think they're moving at a very rapid pace, way faster than healthcare is typically used to moving. But it's also been very impressive to see how quickly some of these AI innovations are hitting the market. And so we kind of see our job to be like, how can we better help enable some of these innovations to come to market faster, to achieve the outcomes that they're trying to achieve. And like you mentioned, this is about like how do you make sure the data quality of the data that you're using to build your models is up to snuff. How do you do it faster? Because too many times I talk to friends of mine who are working in AI companies, and when you look past the glamour of AI, you realize that data scientists spend so much time just cleaning up data. Okay, it's the 78% of the non-glamorous stuff. So just imagine if you could, and healthcare data is notorious in its, like it's a lack of cleanliness and hygiene, I suppose. But if you can reduce that 70-80% of data scientists' time spent in cleaning up data, it's not going to be zero, but what if it could become 20-30% instead? Now that's like the time that can actually go in building and better, newer, innovative models. So I think that's a big opportunity for us to help different AI companies, and even if it's not AI companies, I think eventually every company will be an AI company. So there will be some product, some use case, something that you're building using AI, and just focus on doing the cool stuff. Don't worry about doing the gritty stuff, if you will. Like that's I think going to be a huge boon, especially as you try to attract AI talent down the road, because AI talent right now is really, really hard to find in the market, and I think it's going to be hard to find in the next few years as well. The only other thing I kind of add to what you mentioned, Jatin, is again going back to what you said, where start with the business problem first. And in the case like you were talking about identity, that's it's not Gen AI. It is more like what preceded Gen AI, just regular old AI. So
they've been quieter waves until Gen AI came, and that one was just very noisy.
I mean, it used to be a time that you just could say neural nets and it would sound cool, and no more, I guess. But I think the really cool thing here is how you can take human work and that was repetitive, and you can use AI to automate it. You can deliver immediate ROI back to your organization, and you're actually improving job satisfaction for the folks, because they can actually focus on the more intellectually heavy work and leave a lot of the routine work to just to the AI agents to do it behind the scene. So I think AI, at least in one of the areas that we play, which is around patient identity management, it is going to be transformational, and it already is transformational. So like we've done pilots with customers, and it is just incredible results. Like the amount of time saved for organizations in managing their duplicates, it's just insane. You talk about like 10-20% of improvement in something as a good thing. Here we are talking like multiples, like 3x, 4x improvements in workflow. So I'm really excited about it, and if we can keep on applying AI to the right use cases, we'll have a pretty massive impact.
Other thing that really stands out to me with AI is not only the efficiency, but the consistency. You might ask all three of us how we think about a business term, customer, customer, customer. We all describe that slightly differently. But if we have a business policy that defines it, we can tell AI, this is how we want you to treat every instance of customer, and there is no variability. So I've seen that make a meaningful impact.
AI listens to you.
I do. Yeah. You have to be nice to AI. I mean, somebody was asking about fallacy, and I find when you're talking to your Chat GPT instance, you have to say thank you and continue to help it to be feeling appreciated. So I think there's maybe a fallacy that it's just going to keep working without.
Appreciate.
Incidentally, on the topic of dad jokes, did I hear in an earlier conversation today that we tried getting ChatGPT to say dad jokes, and it didn't do a particularly remarkable job? Certainly not grown worthy enough to be supportive. Is that right?
It did not. I think it was, but to be fair, it was a free version, not the latest ChatGPT 4.0 version that was released yesterday. The free versions, I think that the dad joke skill needs a little bit of work.
There. So
We can put you to work building that out.
Yeah. If I cannot, like, make my daughter grown with my dad jokes, like, then what use am I?
Exactly. Well, it's been really nice talking with you both. Anything else you want to share with the audience before we head out?
I think as a before this webinar, had an opportunity to at least look through the list of folks who had registered for the webinar. I don't know how many folks are on there. Unfortunately, our interface doesn't allow us to see the audience, which is
By design.
yeah, it's yeah. I don't know. I like being in front of the audience and kind of just seeing which of my dad jokes landed and which not. I do think there's a lot happening in healthcare technology right now, and a lot of the attendees, at least the folks who are registered for this webinar, were are part of healthcare technology companies, and so the one thought I would leave you with is just know that first of all, we hear you, we understand you, we have people who have kind of been in the trenches for decades. And kind of understand what you have to go through is when you're building stuff, when you're trying to sell stuff to providers, when you're trying to implement stuff with providers. And in those cases, just recognize you're not alone. There's learning from those who have gone before you. So anything that we can do as a community to help each other and kind of help you accelerate your innovations, adoptions, we definitely want to help you support that.
I'll only add on to that so I joined Rhapsody a few months ago now, and so I'm still I've gotten my feet underneath me, and one of the things that impressed me before and now that I'm in is just the incredible amount of knowledge around interoperability that you just see across this company, which I don't think I've seen in any of my last 15 years, and I've worked for some really knowledgeable organizations. And I raise that only to say that it went for everybody here who's joined us today. You might be in different parts of the interoperability journey. You might be incredibly advanced, and you are ready to you're ready to do something incredibly innovative, and you're interoperability down cold, and you really want to get to the next level. Or you could be just at the beginning of the journey. You don't understand. Today we explained a little bit about what TEFCA is, and that was all news to you. Wherever you're on the journey, this is a team that really prides itself in doing our very best to make our customers happy and help our customers along the journey. So always I'm always excited to hear from people as they're kind of going through that journey and understand how we can help. And to Sagnik's point, as a community, we think of ourselves as an important part of the community and a contributor to the community to the community. So however we can help, you should not be shy about reaching out.
And to help you do that, that's a really nice segue, Jitin. We did share into the chat, and we'll send this out and follow up as well, a LinkedIn post, and we'd love to continue the conversation with you, field questions that you may have, or have a deeper interoperability conversation like Jitin was alluding to. Please join us for that conversation on LinkedIn, and we'll follow up and share some helpful resources with you coming out of the webinar, and look forward to talking to you, everybody, in the future. Thanks, Jitin. Thanks, Sagnik. Talk to you soon. Take care.
Thanks, Michelle.
Very much.